everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here with my co-host Thomas D. Howes for another episode of the Reagan Caucus podcast. We have on a very special guest today. He's a Republican congressman from the great state of Nebraska, my neighbor to the northeast here in Colorado. I would dare say that this man, at least in my opinion, represents Reagan conservatism better than probably any other sitting member of Congress. I'm talking about Don Bacon. Congressman, thank you for joining the two of us today on the Reagan Caucus podcast.
It's a real privilege to be on with you, and I love reading your stuff on social media. So I see it every day.
Awesome. So we very much appreciate you making some time for us. And I want to get right to some questions, starting with Ukraine. You have been very pro-Ukraine. You argue that the Biden administration didn't do enough to support Ukraine, and you've been arguing the same of the Trump administration, whose position on the matter has really been kind of all over the place. For those first 6 months of the term, President Trump seemed, even openly hostile toward Zelensky and Ukraine. But since then, there's been, both highs and lows. It's kind of sometimes depends on the week. I'm curious, where do you see this conflict as it stands now, and what all do you think President Trump and the rest of the free world, for that matter, should be doing in support of Ukraine that they're not currently doing?
I just see such a contradiction in the White House right now. I think they've been very good with Israel, Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, but terrible on Ukraine. The first 6 months, as you say, I was very dissatisfied. I mean, they were worse than Biden's policy. Biden's policy was to help out Ukraine, but to do it reluctantly, too late, too little, with rules of engagement. And I criticize them frequently for it. But this administration, first 6 months, probably been even worse. No really fighting any kind of military aid, and not even seeing the truth of who's behind the war, who's the dictator, who's not. And so there seems to be moral confusion. Who is Putin the good guy, or is Zelensky the good guy from this administration? To me, it's very clear. President Zelensky represents democracy, a country that wants to go free market, wants to have free enterprise, rule of law, wants to be aligned with the West. Putin is the antithesis. He's the enemy of the West, who kills his adversaries, who's shot down 2 airliners. I could just go on and on. He's a bad guy. And this administration seemed to have lack of moral clarity, who's on the right side. Now, the last couple of months, he's gone back and forth. He takes 2 steps forwards, and he takes 2 steps backwards. And we need a president that's going forward on this. So I'm a Ronald Reagan guy on this 100%. I believe in peace through strength. I don't believe in putting our forces in risk when we don't need to. It should be the last resort. But we could surely help Ukraine with high quality weapons and very stringent secondary tariffs. And I believe that's what Ronald Reagan would do here.
Excellent. Well, I want to bring Thomas into the conversation for some questions. Go ahead, Thomas.
So, Representative Bacon, about that with the issue of with Ukraine right now, the last few days they're after this kind of sort of what do you call it? They say in the Protestants use this when you kind of like backsliding of President Trump when it comes to Ukraine and Zelensky. Zelensky came to the White House and he asked for tomahawks, and then because Trump had just spoken to Vladimir Putin, he said no, and then he was hopeful that there would be some sort of peace meeting that broke down. And Zelensky said it was because you didn't give me the tomahawks. He got what he wanted. Putin got what he wanted. He's not going to come to the peace. He's not going to have a ceasefire or come to peace if he doesn't feel like he needs to. And so we need to put the pressure on. And then after that, Trump agreed to some sort of secondary sanctions. What do you know about these sanctions? Are they sufficient, or what would you say needs to be done now?
I would say they're insufficient. Well, back up a little bit. I think the president was wrong about the cruise missiles, but we don't have to just do cruise missiles. They need later versions of the F-16, for example. They need more ATACMS. We should be working with our allies on long-range capabilities that Germany has. I mean, it doesn't have to just be U.S. But what happened was, after the president talked to Putin and Zelensky, Putin would not agree to a ceasefire on the current lines. Mm-hmm. And that's why the president walked away, because he's saying we need to have a ceasefire on the current lines. Zelensky's agreed to that. That doesn't mean he agrees to a peace with the current lines, but he wants to have a ceasefire at the current lines. Whereas Putin wants to keep waging war. He wants to keep bombing cities, and he wants to get more territory, and that's his goal. So that was the breakdown there. But these sanctions, I think, are just a start. I don't have a whole lot of confidence that President Trump will go beyond this. I really believe the Senate and the House should be pushing for very stringent secondary sanctions like Mike Turner and Brian Fitzpatrick have, which I support. I'm on that bill. And there's a matching bill in the Senate. There's a feeling from a lot of Republicans, we want to follow President Trump's lead and not impede. Well, I think we're past that. I think Congress should lead, and we should be putting these bills on the floor, voting for them, and forcing the president's hand more. We're not a subservient branch of Congress. We should be pushing the president to do the right thing, just like we would do if President Biden was in right now. We wouldn't be so docile, and we are right now.
So has there been any effort in Congress to sort of, push these bills? I guess that comes down to Speaker Johnson is the one who ultimately decides, right?
Well, we pushed hard when President Biden was in, and there was some reluctance at the leadership level because President Trump was sort of ambiguous about where he was at, even though he wasn't even president yet. But we were able to get a pretty significant weapons deal passed out of the House and Senate. And I worked extensively with Speaker Johnson to get that done. Now, subsequently, now that President Trump's in, there is this few amongst, I would say, the majority of the majority that we should try to work and support President Trump on his Ukraine-Russia policy. I don't think it's working. I think that the president, and it was terrible the first 6 months. I would say the last couple, as already mentioned, he's been taking 2 steps forward, two steps backwards. He's there, he's back, and he's all over the map. And there's no real strategic direction that I can see. So I believe the Congress should be stepping up, passing these stringent secondary sanction bills that we have. And I'm putting my action behind my words. I got behind a Democrat bill and signed that discharge petition. And I had some Republicans say, why would you put your name on a Democrat bill? I said, well, put your bill on the floor for a discharge petition, and I'll sign that. But I will sign right now on Ukraine. I don't care what buttons I got to push. I'm going to be pushing them all until we get action.
Yeah. Now, I remember, we talked about this previously on the show. General Kellogg made some comment which insinuated what many people have been concerned about, that there are people in Trump's administration and at the Pentagon that are sort of obstructive when it comes to helping Ukraine. We've seen it several times where Trump has said, hey, we're going to give X to Ukraine. And then we find out later that the Pentagon says, no, we don't want to do that. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I do. I like Joe Kellogg, and I'm a big fan of his daughter, too. I love reading her commentary that's out there. The president, I think there's 2 issues with the president right now. He's right, then he's left. He's right, and he's left. So the direction to his team and to the free world is very confusing. And I would also say if he really did want to have these long-range precision weapons to go to Ukraine, he needs to have his hand firmly on the yoke or the steering wheel. Right now, I think he's deferred a lot of this, holding onto the steering wheel to his subordinates who don't share a very strong Ukraine position. Now, we do know for a fact that there are folks in the Pentagon that are anti-Ukraine. Colby is one of them. I think Hegseth is there too, maybe not to the same degree as Colby, but it seems like they're taking a lot of direction from the Colby influence there, by the way, which is aligned with Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, who are not conservatives. They're not Republican. They're far right. Far right is not conservative, in my view. And so there is a tug of war within the administration that is resisting help to Ukraine. I think the president himself, though, is a little bit contradictory in where he's at.
John?
Yeah, I want to just maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about tariffs. Congressman, you've been very opposed to President Trump's trade war. You've introduced legislation at least a couple of times now to restore that power to Congress. You don't seem to be getting a lot of support on those efforts from your colleagues, including Republicans, who would prefer just to fall in line with Trump. But I think there are these, that we've seen these clear signs that the tariffs are causing a lot of strain on the U.S. economy in different sectors. It's sort of interesting to me. It would seem that if there were any single issue that would, supersede party loyalty to President Trump, it would be something like this, this incoherent economic policy that's causing all kinds of unnecessary pain to everyday Americans. Do you have any hope that Congress is going to do anything on this front, or do we kind of need to rely entirely on the judiciary to kind of shut down a lot of this executive overreach on tariffs?
I point out the president campaigned on tariffs, and he was very honest, and he did win. I didn't campaign on tariffs, and I don't have to support them, right? But unfortunately, a lot of Republicans want to give him a chance to put in a signature economic policy. I don't think tariffs work. The last time Republicans have supported tariffs and a protectionist foreign or economic policy, trade policy, was in the 1930s, and it failed. Now, there was a slight aberration with President Nixon in the early 70s, but it also failed, right? So our philosophy has been Milton Friedman, right? Free trade is best. We want fair trade. Ronald Reagan has a great video that Canada put out that says, hey, I'm for free trade. Protectionism is wrong. However, I'm like Japan in this particular incident in 1987 isn't following the trade agreement we have. So I'm going to put momentary tariffs on them, but to get them to correct their policy. So the conservative policy is free trade, but should be fair. And the president, since 1980s, has been very pro-tariff. That's his dogma. It's more aligned with Ted Kennedy, George McGovern view back in the 70s, frankly. I do think that a lot of Republicans in the House disagree with the policy, but they want to give the president a chance to see if this works or not. And I think if we hit economic headwinds because of it, there will be some quick changes coming out of Congress. But right now, it's hard to say what's happening. I think you're right. There are indicators that this is hurting our manufacturing. It's surely not helping out our agriculture thus far. But his tariff policy has been on and off. He puts tariffs on, takes them off, puts them on. It's really hard to know what the impact is right now because his tariff policy has been all over the map with a lot of countries. So I think it needs probably a little more time to thresh itself out. But to your point on the judiciary, it's very clear that Article 1 in the Constitution gives tax policy and tariff policy to the Congress. Now, we've on multiple occasions gave some emergency powers to the president. We haven't done that since the 1970s, but that law is still on the books. The president's been using this to do vast trade policy, vast tariff policy under the guise of emergency powers. The appellate court ruled 9-4 against it. And I think that the Supreme Court will probably agree with the appeals court on this, and the president's tariff policy is in trouble.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, and then I suppose then Congress would have to actually decide if they're going to support this or they're going to,
And this way it should have always worked. The president there would be some support for tariffs in Congress on targeted countries. Most of us don't like China's trade with China. China's very unfair. They steal our companies, they steal our technology, they subsidize key industries that drive our businesses out of, into bankruptcy. So there are the president could make his case to Congress on some specific countries and get support. That's what he has to do. He needs to come to Congress with a trade policy and put it up for a vote, but he doesn't want to do that. And I think the Supreme Court will support Article 1 in this.
And I suppose that could also serve the purpose of drawing other countries that we free up trade with to us and away from China, if we can kind of do it right. As far as because right now, you're putting all these tariffs on China and then all these other people, other countries, so none of them are actually coming to do business with the United States as opposed to China.
We had some pretty good trade deals that we were working with Europe and in Asia. And the whole goal of the Asia trade agreement was to create an in team with the United States and an out team and keep China out. But the president walked away from any kind of multilateral trade deal. And by the way, so did Hillary Clinton. Both sides on that. But in the end, I think it hurt America. It put us on the outside. Now a lot of these countries are making trade deals with China. Which is just the opposite of what we want to have happen.
And then I guess to change it up here a little bit, this is an issue that I have to admit my own ignorance on. I've been trying to sort this out and try to figure this out, this issue with the bombing the boats off of the coast of Venezuela. it seems to me that my main criticism is the administration hasn't been very transparent about the rationale for these attacks. And I could imagine, various stories I could tell related to Maduro regime where you could maybe possibly justify it, so long as, they're keeping Congress, they're working with Congress over this. But I haven't heard that story. Do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about the rationale for these attacks?
Yeah, I've been tracking it pretty closely, being on the Armed Services Committee. I do think the shutdown has hurt our ability to do oversight.
Okay.
Our focus right now is to get government back open. We need 60 votes in the Senate to do that. I think the president should come, and his team should come to Congress, make their case for going after these boats on the Gulf of Mexico or on the Pacific Ocean side, and they got to make their case that they have legal basis to do this. By the way, if Congress approved this, it does give them legal basis. And right now, without it, I think he's at risk of this not being considered legal. So he should come to Congress, make his case. He also should show the intelligence that gives us 100% confidence that these boats are carrying cocaine or fentanyl, whatever it may be. And if he could do that, I do think there's general support in Congress for this. I mean, I can't ignore the fact that 100,000 Americans die a year from these drugs. And that, in Vietnam, we lost 58,000 in 10 years, right? On an average of 5,800 a year. We're losing 100,000 a year from these drugs. And we all have seen the impact. My family, probably more than many. I'm the oldest of 9 kids. My youngest 3 brothers have died, one from an intentional drug overdose, one from an accidental drug overdose, and one from drug abuse. Yeah. And so, but I'm not an aberration. There's all over Omaha, I know people that had coworkers die, or a son that they thought was an innocent drug but had fentanyl in it, and he's dead. And so I do think there's a desire to deal with this. And the president, I will give him credit, and it was one of my takeaways I'd like to give to our team here. Don't oppose the president 100% just to oppose the president. Yeah. Take it case by case, and when he's wrong, disagree. When he's right, agree. But also understand some of the nuances here. Whether it's this drug war, I think the president has identified a real problem. Is it the right solution? And is he going about it the right way? That's a different story. He should come to Congress. The crime in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Portland, you name it, the crime that we're seeing in our cities are terrible. Most Americans know we should not be ignoring this. When Washington, D.C. crime is 7 times higher than Omaha's per capita. It's not fair to those people in Washington. Chicago, it's it's just terrible. I think the president's identified a real problem, and that puts him ahead of most Democrats. But his solution to bringing in the Guard is temporary. It's really not a solution. We need a better solution that deals with more cops, better judges, better prosecutors, and things like that. So identifying the problem is one thing. Identifying the right solution is something totally separate.
Yeah, that's well said. So, John?
Yeah, so we are recording this on October 24th, Friday. The government, as you mentioned, is still shut down at this point. Do you see any progress being made behind the scenes? Anything that makes you hopeful that maybe even by the time this airs a couple days from now, things will be different? Or what are your thoughts?
I wish I had more hope. If it was just ACA COVID-era tax credits, this could have been done a long time ago, because most Republicans don't want to see a total abandonment of this, because people's premiums will skyrocket, and we don't want that. But we don't want just what Biden passed on a party line vote in 2021 either. We need to probably have income caps on these things. We need to ensure that only the people that are that need the ACA tax credits are using it. About 1/3 of this money doesn't even go to the individuals. It goes to companies and stuff. So I think John Thune is right. These COVID-era tax credits need significant reform. But my point is, there's a desire to have a compromise here. And this could have been done 2 weeks ago. What concerns me is the Democrats, even moderate ones, will tell you, and have told me, it's really not about ACA tax credits. It's to show their base that they're fighting President Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't know of a good way out of this when you're just trying to fight President Trump. There's such hate and disdain on the base of the Democrat Party that it's driving most of this behavior right now. So to the point where you'll hear people actually tell, like Politico, hey, if I vote to open up government, my campaign fundraising will collapse. That's been said, right?
Wow.
That if we collapse now on this and given to Speaker John Thune, we're going to lose Virginia and the New Jersey governor's races. These are the kind of things. This is the other stuff that's out there that, unfortunately, is begging for a long-term shutdown. And if you ask my Democrat colleagues across the aisle, what's your way out? They can't give you a good answer. One of my friends says, Don, I want guardrails. I go, what does that mean? You want guardrails? But it's a vague term that I don't see as being easily done in a CR. And basically, it's just clearly a philosophical differences with the President Trump on the guard, what's going on in the Caribbean, as you guys have already mentioned, tariffs. But, my rejoinder is, are we going to be shut down for 3.5 years? Because you guys can't come up with a clear way out of this. And so I've become increasingly more pessimistic. I do think when federal police stop getting paid, you see SNAP shut down, which is going to be happening on 1 November.
Yeah.
It's going to put extra pressure on the Democrats. But I have to remind every Democrat, Barack Obama said he would never negotiate anything different than a clean CR. And that's where Republicans are at today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that now talking about the Democrats here, I'm not a Democrat. I've never been a Democrat. I've never wanted to become a Democrat, but I have come to appreciate that America's better when both parties are sane and okay and functional and competent, because they compete with each other, and it forces your party to be better too, right? The Democrats have very low popularity as far right now, and it seems to me some of the success of even the last election was more about people's dislike of the Democrats than about anything that they were affirming. Do you see any self-awareness among your Democratic colleagues on Congress that this is a problem? We do need to be better, but then what's preventing them from being better?
Well, their whole drive right now is anti-Trump. That's the only thing that really unifies them. You're right. Their favorable ratings are way below Republicans right now, but they are unified that they hate Trump, which is different than their favorable rating. And I think Republicans, when they look at the favorable ratings, are taking a false comfort because they see our favorable ratings higher, but it doesn't show below the waterline on that iceberg.
Yeah.
They hate President Trump, and they're very unified in that. And so I think that puts us at risk, the Republicans at risk in the midterms, regardless of the favorable ratings. I've been studying politics since I was 13. I was a Ronald Reagan fan in 1976 when he ran against Gerald Ford. And I've been a Ronald Reagan guy ever since. My analysis of the last election was Joe Biden had the lowest favorable ratings going back to 1952. And he said he was going to run, and the Democrats got behind him. They didn't have a primary, really. They just sort of coronated him. Then you have this debate, and everybody realizes Joe Biden's not up to the task. But they don't have primaries. So they coronate Kamala Harris without a primary. And she was so bad in 2020, she couldn't even get to the first primary. And then she made a fatal error. She said she couldn't think of one thing that she disagreed with or would have done differently than Joe Biden. She was done at that point. President Trump got elected because Biden and Harris were so unpopular that people were wanting they were saying, we got to try something different because the border was so disastrous. We cannot allow this to continue. Bottom line. But I don't think the Democrats have learned from it, other than now they're focused on Trump. That's it. And they're also, I think it's interesting on trade. They've taken a lot of Ronald Reagan's positions, which I find interesting. The other day I was in an elevator, and this Democrat goes, Don, thank you for defending against Putin and defending free trade. I go, you sound just like Ronald Reagan, right? And these are Democrats. So there's a little bit of this. A lot of people say, why don't you be more Democrat? And I go, I could never be a Democrat. For one, I think they worship government. They see government's the answer. I believe in the Almighty, number one. But two, it's the social issues. They are so out of whack on the social issues. They are on these 80-20 issues. They're up with the 20, and they are beholden to this, the transgender stuff and abortion on demand until birth. I mean, they're way out. They're so out of sync with the average American on the social stuff. And so I've come to the conclusion my job is to fight for the soul of our party.
Yeah.
And defend our traditional conservative Reagan values and fight to get that back and get rid of the Steve Bannons, get rid of the Tucker Carlsons, get rid of the Fuentes guy who's suddenly become, now that he's become anti-Trump, the Democrats have been putting him on all their stuff lately, but he's an anti-Semite. Yeah. There's no place for anti-Semitism in the Republican Party, period. And so we just got to, we're going to have to toughen up against these nationalist populists who are trying to take over the party. In some ways they have, and we got to reclaim it back.
Amen.
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, we talk a lot about Ronald Reagan here on the Reagan Caucus podcast. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of people on today's political right, you talked about them just now, they view Reaganism, Reagan conservatism as the wrong direction for meeting today's challenges. Maybe they thought it made sense in the 1980s, but in the year 2025, there's this culture war. There's lots of libs that need to be owned online. So they don't see Ronald Reagan's model as a good fit. What would you say to those people, Congressman?
Well, I think Ronald Reagan it worked in the 1980s, it would work today. If we had that philosophy, things change. I mean, obviously technology changes, and but his philosophy, I think, is for the ages, right? It will be, and it will settle as well for the future. Free trade, for example, gives us the best products, best quality, at the best price, in the most efficient manner possible. That does not change. And so, as a case in point, but I think what happened to our party was we lost to President Obama, 2008, 2012. So there was anger towards John McCain, and Romney didn't fight hard enough. So that was this philosophy, what we're going to fight. And it became that who can fight back. President Trump knows how to fight. I didn't agree with him half the time. That's the problem, right? And so I think that a lot of parties said they wanted to win. Winning became more important than doing the right thing. Ends justified the means for a lot of folks, and that's not a godly perspective in my view. But I think that's how we got down this path. And then you have folks like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon who are persuasive, but they are 100% off. They are not Republican. They're not conservative. They got their own brand of, they got their own ideology out there. But we're fighting for the soul of our party with folks like that there. And I think we tried to have this big tent theory, I think, for a long time, and try to have Bannon and Tucker in the tent. I think in the end, they've become so anti-Israel, in some ways anti-Semitic. They cannot be. They should be out, and they're not part of our party. And I think the same thing with Fuentes and all these other crazies that are out there. And so that's one of the things I want to do when I didn't want to run again for a lot of reasons. I got family, and 10 years I think is enough. But one of the things I want to do is fight for the soul of our party. I want to help out the governor of Georgia, maybe to be the next president, or the governor of Virginia to be the next president. I love Nikki Haley. And there's people out there that I align very comfortably with, that I'd like to be the leader once again of the GOP.
Amen.
Does that give you sort of, now that you aren't running for re-election, do you feel sort of liberated in a way to really do some things you didn't feel like you could before in Congress?
Well, I've always been open and vocal. I mean, that's why President Trump campaigned against me in 2022 and tried to find a primary opponent. Now it's different. When President Biden was in there, it was easy to criticize President Biden. President Trump agreed, so we didn't have a lot of conflict there. But I did vote for the infrastructure bill. Ronald, I believe traditional Reagan values support infrastructure. Well, that bill had some problems with it, I'm not going to deny. But it was Abraham Lincoln supported the Transcontinental Railroad, Eisenhower, the interstate highway system. Infrastructure allows us to have better commerce, trade, safety. I can just go on and on. But I have more of a traditional view there of what infrastructure does. So I voted for it. I voted to certify. I believe this was a constitutional duty to do so. I voted for the bipartisan investigation January 6th. These things put me out of sync with the president, but I didn't duck from it, and I defended it. Now that I'm not running, it just happens to happen when he is the president, and we have disagreements on trade, Ukraine, how to treat Canada, how to treat Denmark and Greenland. It shouldn't be the Gulf of America, things like that. And I feel like I can't ignore some of those issues. I don't think I should fight on every issue. I do think that we should pick and choose and stand our ground. And I really want to let voters and Republicans down the road know that there were people speaking up during all of this. And I think it's a placeholder that people come back to say, okay, not everybody towed the line or caved.
Excellent. Do you have anything else you'd like to ask, Thomas?
No, I think that's great. I think let's see, just 1 second here. What was your favorite moment from Ronald Reagan's presidency? Tell us about that, and then we'll close on that. How about it?
Well, I really believe that the Soviet Union fell because of Ronald Reagan and the defense spending that he did. You know, my background, I joined the military in 1984, or 85, excuse me. I graduated from college in 1984. I was a 20-year-old. I worked for a guy named Ed Madigan, a congressman from Illinois. He was in the leadership of the Republican House at that point. But I thought about joining the military before that and going to ROTC, but there wasn't a lot of pride in the military. And when you hang around some of the units, I was like, I was not impressed. Really, the main thing was there wasn't pride in what they were doing. And I was a military history guy. I loved Eisenhower. I loved General Grant. I studied World War II, Civil War. I was really into this stuff. But Ronald Reagan comes in 1980 and really doesn't take over until 1981. And he invests money in the military, and the pride skyrocketed in the military, and this confidence that we could take on the Soviet Union. We could take on other, the bad people in the world. They're out there. And the pride in the military got to the point where when I reconsidered joining the military at 21 in 1985, I liked what I saw. And so I always am grateful for Ronald Reagan for restoring pride and confidence in our military. We were terrible after Vietnam. In the late 70s, our capabilities were so bad, underinvested, no pride. We were basically an empty suit of a military out there, and Reagan fixed that. And I'll always be grateful.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. That was a great story, and we want to thank you for coming on the Reagan Caucus podcast. Both of us certainly appreciate your insights and your efforts in Congress, and we wish you the best of luck in your final term in office.
Well, if you have websites, memberships, emails, let me know because I'm in. Okay.
Excellent. That's great to hear.
You.
And for everybody else who's watching or listening today, thanks for tuning in. If you watch today's episode on YouTube, as always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please like and subscribe as well. And we will see you next time on the Reagan Caucus podcast.